Welcome to my new video where I show you how to draw a seamless My Little Pony from scratch in Godot. For this video I'll be using my custom 461 stable build, which adds anti-aliasing to the editor in compatibility mode in order to make all the shapes I draw look seamless in OpenGL. Other modes already have the anti-aliasing options available in the official release of Godot engine. In order to be able to draw shapes directly in the Godot engine, I created the Scalable Vector Shapes 2D add-on, which you can install from inside the editor when you are using release 4.4 or higher. A newly installed plugin must be enabled via the project settings by navigating to the Plugins tab and checking on the Enabled box. Once enabled, Scalable Vector Shapes 2D will add a new panel to the bottom dock, which you can use to create new shapes, or import shapes from SVG as native Godot node. So before we get to drawing our pony, let's make sure we activate anti-aliasing by looking it up in the project settings. Making our SVG guy look crisp. So let's get started on our pony. I've never drawn a My Little Pony myself, so I'm using a reference I found online. I do prefer freehand drawing, so this whole process involves eyeballing and using the mouse, copying like an amateur artist, but no AI. The first thing I want is to pick a nice bright fill color that does justice to the bright and beautiful My Little Pony universe. And I pick a stroke color using the eyedropper tool on the fill color and then darkening it using the value setting from the HSV sliders. I want to start out by using a rectangle for a pony leg, but I want to draw the fill over the stroke using this toggle button. The first shape you draw is placed at the 0x0 origin, so to move it we use the W shortcut, toggling on move mode. By pressing down the mouse wheel and dragging, you pan the viewport. Double clicking or pressing F2 allows you to rename a node in the scene tree. So let's call this rectangle shape leg for now. Let's resize the rectangle using the bottom right handle, and once we're happy with the size we press the convert to path button in the inspector so we can start sculpting it. Because I want the top side of the leg to draw nicely over another shape's fill, I break the loop of the stroke where its first and last point link. This also means I have to realign the points, which I do with the help of a grid and by turning on Pixel Snap in the Project Settings tab and setting the snap distance to 4 pixels matching the grid size. To make a nice My Little Pony style hoof shape, I change the straight line into a curve by left clicking and dragging it. By activating this toggle, we can place the leg's pivot. We test rotate, turning on the rotate mode using the keyboard shortcut E. Using the Q shortcut, we re-enter edit mode to show the handles again, so we can shorten the leg to just the lower leg. Let's rename its node accordingly. Now we create another rectangle which we place right above the lower leg. Then we drag the lower leg node in the scene tree to make it a direct child of the new rectangle, which we rename to upper leg. At this stage we're almost ready to glue the two shapes together, but first we make sure that the fill polygon of the upper leg node is drawn over the stroke line of the lower leg node by reordering them. Toggling on this chain link button in edit mode activates merge mode, which glues together 2 or more shapes via one vertex, even when its position changes. This effect is managed by a helper node called SVS Vertex Merge 2D. Here we change the joint mode of the upper leg's stroke to rounded in order to get rid of the pointy edge when the shape changes. Now we want to make the upper leg strokes up top thinner by editing the width curve in the Line 2D node inspector. One thing to note about the width curve property is that it is stored as a resource in your project that can be shared across nodes, which will happen by default when a Line2D node is duplicated. This will come back later in this video. For now, let's speed up this bit, in which we save and test run our scene for the first time. Here I want to change the default clear color under the environment settings to a nice and shiny Pony Universe sky color. Now to speed up some more sculpting and tweaking. Now we duplicate the entire leg using the Ctrl-D shortcut and move it a little bit to the right. The 4 points in this duplicated leg are not merged like the original. And also the curve property of the duplicated shapes is still shared. So let's pop open the curve settings in the inspector to press on this toggle button, which also serves as an indicator that a resource is shared. Now before we fix the vertex merges for the new leg, let's first move our existing merge nodes to be children of the leg they work on. And then we make 2 new merge nodes using merge mode to glue the new lower leg onto the new upper leg. Here we rename the 2 leg nodes to front back leg and front leg. Now we reopen the Scalable Vector Shapes 2D bottom dock to create a new rectangle shape for the body. So let's rearrange this new rectangle to be drawn between these 2 legs and rename its node in the scene tree to body. Soon after I realize I need the leg shapes to be children of the body node. In this sequence, playing at 48 times the normal speed, I sculpt the body into shape, after which I duplicate the 2 front legs, fixing their vertex merges and making their curves unique, the same way I duplicated the first leg. I also start toying around with the back leg, trying to glue it cleanly to the back side of the body. This will take a while. At this point of the video I spent 30 minutes in real-time drawing. So while fixing the back leg shape to the back side of the body shape and thickening its stroke, I noticed that the front leg's width curve resource was still the same as that of the back leg, because it was also thicker. So here I click the Make Unique toggle and make it slimmer again. As you probably noticed, in this setup we rely on pivot placement and hierarchy to animate the limbs of our game character, because this enables us to use keyframes in an animation player on the rotation property of each shape that comprises the game character. Another way of looking at the pivot is as a local position, which is relative to all the individual points in a shape. In terms of physics, it's called the origin, or local 0x0 position. And for Godot's own sprite 2D nodes, it's called the offset. This in turn makes it the exact node position in global space. When a parent node moves around in 2D space, its child nodes move along with it, and when a parent node rotates or scales in 2D space, its child nodes rotate and scale right along with it as well. Merging the points of a shape together overrides this effect by forcing the point of one shape to match its position exactly to the position of the other shape's point when that moves. Up next on the to-do list is the ponytail, for which we use an empty path as a starting point instead of a primitive shape. Because the tail should move along with the body, we should make it its child, which I mess up here. Giving a meaningful name helps to correct that later. We do know where we want to pin the tail on the pony, pun intended. Holding the Control key or Command key for Mac allows you to add new points to a shape anywhere inside the viewport with a single click. Realizing my previous mistake actually took quite some minutes in real time. Double-clicking on a segment inserts a new point between two existing ones. We're using that new point to merge with an extra thin line we're drawing over the tail. Because the tail shape is selected right now, the newly created empty path will automatically become a child of the tail node and be placed at the 0 by 0 position relative to the tail shape's position. Here we use the merge mode again to connect both sides of the thin line to the tail. And we repeat the last couple of steps to draw yet another thin line. Next, we change the fill to be a linear gradient texture. As you can see, the default color is modulated by the stop colors and not overridden. At this stage I have been drawing for about an hour in real time. Now let's mount a head and some beautiful manes onto this pony. Here I choose to create the head ellipse as a path because that is easier to sculpt. A primitive ellipse shape, however, is easier to resize, so luckily we can still convert the shape back to an ellipse primitive and set a greater size before changing it back to a path shape again. Just setting the pivot to the root of the head here on top of the neck, which must look familiar to you by now. Now we're going to mold a nice and bright rectangle into a beautiful bush of hair on top of the head. While studying My Little Ponies, I noticed that the manes they have on their head are one of the most originally identifying features, giving them personality, which is a great reason to pay extra attention to small details like this point. Here we change the fill color to white in order to enable gradient stop colors to be set exactly the same as the gradient colors of the ponytail, using the eyedropper tool of the color picker input. If you have a sharp eye, you can see here that the stroke color of the hair does not match that of the tail. I only noticed that myself after recording. Just like with the tail, we're drawing thinner lines over the hair here. And in just a minute we're going to add some back hair. For this, we want a small portion of the outline to be thinner using the width curve. So this nice rectangle will become the hair at the back side of the head. You see, it's already a bit rotated as a child of the head node. Again, we eagerly make use of the merge mode button to glue this point onto a point on the shape that is drawn over the head. At this point, I have been drawing on my pony for a good 1.5 hours. I started programming at quite a young age because I really wanted to learn how to make computer games. I wanted to learn to do all the aspects myself, but almost all my time went up on perfecting my skill as a programmer. This resulted in me ending up with a job as a programmer, having rarely spent any significant time in my life learning how to draw, let alone make music, write a good plot, or understanding game mechanics. That doesn't mean I have never tried making games. I made quite a few, but I missed a sense of community and cooperation. Having little or no time to do things like joining a game jam with a single income family to support, I tried to trust my intuition to tell me what I should spend my time on. In a moment we're going to make the eye shape act as a pair of clipping shears on the iris we're drawing. So let's edit the clip paths property under masking in the inspector. The clip paths property of a shape consists of a list of other shapes that clip their shape off of the shape with the clip paths list. To be more precise, the other shape can perform a difference, intersection or union operation. The iris has been completely clipped away right now by the eye, which we fix by toggling on use intersect when clipping for the eye shape. And now the iris is visible everywhere that it overlaps with the eye fill. So the default clipping operation is actually difference, which is used to cut out holes of another shape. This video will not tackle that subject, so if you want to learn more about cutting holes in shapes, you can watch the A to Z explainer in this playlist. So here you see me repeat the exact same steps for the pupil except for checking on use intersect when clipping because it's already checked on. I keep second guessing myself about the stroke for the eye node. So here I delete it again, making sure there is no reference to it. If you forget to remove an assignment like I just did, there is usually no real harm done because nil references are cleaned up at save time. But having assignments to deleted nodes like this can lead to error messages. So trusting this intuition about what to spend my spare time on led me to start doing things I had been learning all my life for fun. So instead of building games in Godot and running into things that I would like to have in the engine, I ended up building that stuff myself as a plugin. So after studying my example ponies carefully, I finally see what to do with the outline of the eye. And to add a bit of extra personality to my pony, I will just draw an eyelash here, using a black stroke and no fill, relying again on the width curve property to tweak it. So now after drawing this first eye here, I've been drawing for about an hour and 45 minutes in real time. And yes, I did indeed add everything up in an Excel sheet to prove to you that this can be done by a total amateur in such a short amount of time. Reason being that, in my humble opinion, I have convinced way too few people that this plugin adds a set of very viable workflows for scalable 2D art. Drawing the nose, I do not introduce any new features, so we're quickly skipping through this bit. But I do slow down here for a moment to illustrate the care that we take when placing the Scalable Vector Shape 2D nodes in the hierarchy, and to illustrate that most of the time is actually spent perfecting small details like the pointiness of a nose, and manipulating the thickness of outlines using the line to the ease width curve. Only to speed up again to try and keep you engaged, so that when we yet again reach a point of interest in my recording, you have not fallen asleep. Because now, while drawing the mouth, we will actually introduce a new feature. Here we use just 3 points to draw a toothy little pony mouth. And to make our pony smile, as well as make it easy to animate opening and closing the mouth, we introduce arcs. Arcs are distinct from normal Bezier curves, as they are mathematically represented as a segment of a full ellipse using the direction around the clock that the ellipse runs, called sweep, and an x and y radius value. You can also change the rotation of an ellipse, which we won't be doing in this video. Now, let's pick the same radius values for the upper lip and demonstrate the ease with which we can now animate the mouth opening and closing. First, we try to use rounded begin and end caps to smooth out the lips. Soon after, I realized that yet again for the umpteenth time now I prefer using the width curve property for this. After drawing the mouth, I have spent just 2 hours in real-time drawing. Normally, I would not advise using Z-index to override draw order, because it makes the draw order less predictable. That being said, this hair, as a child of the head shape, would be drawn behind the body otherwise. A better alternative is reordering the nodes, where the hair node's transform is not dictated by the hierarchy directly, but via a remote transform 2D node. I illustrate this approach in other videos, but in this case I just wanted to make sure you are at least aware of this possibility so that you might look it up in the official Godot documentation yourself. Now of course drawing this right eye, or better yet near eye, is done in almost exactly the same way we did the right or far eye. But while drawing this new eye, I started to notice how ugly the shape now called Pupil Shine 2 was. This was because it's a little too small for a gradient, so I dropped the gradient and gave it a semi-transparent half pixel wide outline instead. And again, the drawing of the ear here does not introduce anything new, so I just keep speeding up the video. At the moment, 24 times the normal speed. One of the very first explainers about Scalable Vector Shapes 2D used the blue heart emoji as a reference to copy a pretty shape from, resulting in the beating heart example scene in the add-on. The heart and stars emoji is the one we use for our daughter, so I thought it'd be cool to use her signature emoji as a cutie mark for my pony here. So whereas I draw most of the pony by eyeballing to give them their own personality and not blatantly copy over someone else's work entirely, I have no qualms tracing over this heart and stars emoji. So for the finishing touch of our pony, we want to use one new feature that will simplify animating a blinking eye, which is gluing the eyelash to the eye outline. The key here is to remember the index number of the point that you want to glue your shape to, and using that as the new key in the glue map property of the boss shape. This point will dictate the position of the assigned node, overriding the normal transform behavior. Here we again use an arc, because that seems to look better. And we test animate the lash blinking by changing the eye outline curve. And except for the color of the hair outline and strokes, the pony is done and ready to be animated. Getting to this point took me 3 hours in total. Time did not speed up, but I did speed up time a little to get to the end here. But before I let you go, I do want to give you a sneak preview of how you can use the Godot animation player node to animate shapes via property tracks. But for me to go into detail about that would take me editing another long video, whereas the recordings of me drawing this pony total a mere 3 hours, editing this video down to 24 minutes actually took me more like 40 hours. That's a lot of work for just a couple of hundred views, guys. So if you do enjoy my work and enjoy my plugin, please spread the word so that we can grow the Godot Scalable 2D web game builder community.